I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, May the 18th, brought to you in part by Joplin Regional Stockyards. The boys are going to sleep in a little bit here on this Monday, not starting until 8 o'clock in the morning. They're expecting around 5,000 head for the Monday sale. You can view and bid on that sale at dvauction.com or at joplinstockyards.com. Joplin has the most progressive auction market in the nation, and they'll be glad to help you market your cattle in any way that you choose. As we get towards, I think, the climax of this COVID-19 as far as our cattle production, I'm not saying that the market might not get worse before it gets better, but we are starting to get our slaughter back a little bit. This week our slaughter was 47,000 bigger than it was the previous week, so that makes us feel good that we are starting to come back a little bit and eventually get on the way back to having something like normal. And once we get to that point, we know we've got a lot of cattle to work through, and then as we get to work through those, we know that they can turn the change speeds up, they can work on Saturdays, they can work through those cattle. We made it through the fire last summer at Holcomb, Kansas there, and pulled through that deal. We'll eventually get through this deal. Are we going to have to do a set-aside deal? Maybe. Are we going to have to put some cattle on some holding rations for a while, maintenance only? Maybe. But I tell you what, these smaller, even locker plants, they're running a lot of these locker plants day and night, guys. And a lot of these smaller little regional packers are you know, they're not going to pick up the whole slack, but they're sure working on it. I mean, I know there's pot loads of fat cattle leaving the 5-area feeding region, scattering out towards these smaller plants. And they're getting those cattle harvested in those. And I think along with that and turning up our chain speeds and working through this deal, we knew we was going to have a lot of cattle to get through this summer anyway. It's just making it that much worse. But I think we're coming. We're about to top the hill here, and then we're going to be coming down the other side. But there's a lot of things out there, guys. A lot of things, a lot of movements. The irons are hot right now. Do not let this fire go out. Please stay strong. Stay informed. Stay aware of what's going on. Keep calling your representatives, your senators, your people that are in a place where they can make a difference, and stay alert, and we can bring about some change during this time. Now, we did see box beef cutout values start to dip late in the week there. So they finally topped out around $477 a hundred there. And you know, guys, these packers were making $2,500, $2,600 a head. If that's not ridiculous, the gouging that's been going on, don't let them off the hook. We're going to wake up one of these days and these box beef cutout values are just going to take a nosedive. They were down quite a bit, you know, 40 bucks or something there late in the week. They still ended up higher on the weighted average for the bulk of last week's trade, but still down pretty big the last half of the week there. And don't let these packers turn this around on you and make you think that it's a negative for your fed cattle market. Now, they've had a pretty good party here while everybody else has been locked up, and they've been cashing in on it, and big time. I mean, just shameful, criminal. And we've got to do something about it. We've got to institute some things that are going to make a difference. Now, the one that I've been involved in is trying to set a mandated minimum negotiated cash trade per week per facility, per major facility. You know, I pushed the 30-14 for you know, several weeks there. We talked about it. We got kind of a big push. It ended up being introduced, and a bill drawn up at 50-14. We're still pushing on this thing, guys. We've got to get something done. Now, our nation's biggest Cattlemen's Association, which is also supposedly representing the beef entity of our country, And it seems like kind of a conflict of interest to me whenever your beef outfits are completely taking advantage of the cattle outfits. How can you represent both of them and have your feet, on the floor here and being honest with guys? But they don't want to do anything. Status quo. Hey, everybody's happy. Let's just keep going on. Now, when somebody puts the screws to you that bad and puts the screws to your consumers, and don't think that it's not going to end up hurting our overall beef demand, because when these consumers are going in there and getting this sticker shock that's just now hitting our retail markets, $10 a pound for hamburger meat, a roast big enough to feed your family on a Sunday after church, over $100. It's absolutely ridiculous. And guys are getting no more for their cattle, and their cattle are getting backed up, and all this is going on. So you've got NCBA. They come out and they don't want to do anything, and they just pretty much want to attack any idea that anybody comes up with, especially if it's not theirs. So they've come out on several statements this past week after the bill got introduced for the 50-14. That's 50% mandated minimum negotiated cash trade. Now, there may be some wiggle room in there somewhere. You guys up north don't want me to announce that, but if you guys in the south would get behind this, some of your cattlemen's groups, namely Texas Cattle Feeders Association or Kansas Livestock Association, if one of you guys would get in there and push this deal where it'd be a shoe-in, you could probably negotiate that thing down where you could live, which is why I was pushing the 30-14. But when your northern guys are doing all the heavy lifting, they had policy for 50. That's what they're going to do. So Chuck Grassley had introduced a bill, 17, 18 years ago for 50. It wasn't hard to get him to do that. Now we've got bipartisan support on it. We've got a lot of big name senators already supporting this. Guys are calling around, getting their senators excited about it. I talked to one of my friends down in Louisiana. He made calls in to both senators there. There's guys all over the country calling in, and they know, the senator that knows the least about the cattle and beef business knows that this has been a wreck. And they know people aren't going to take it anymore, and they know that people want something done. So they're probably going to be pretty easy to push into this deal. But if one of you big outfits in the Southern Plains would get behind it, you could probably negotiate it down where you could live. But NCBA has come out and said, oh, we don't want any government intervention in this, and we want to keep them out of it. Really? Is that your argument for this, for not supporting this? Or are you just kind of doing this in favor of your big packer members and your big corporate feeder members? Government intervention, right? Everybody can't wait to get the bailout or the stimulus. They've all got their hand out for that. Everybody jockeying around trying to see how we're going to split that up and trying to get rid of the limits per producer because they're not big enough. They want more money. Big outfits are wanting a big piece of the pie too. Is that not government intervention? You guys that have taken drought relief, is that not government intervention? You guys that take advantage of CRP whenever we get in drought situations for extra grazing or hay, is that not government intervention? Is the beef checkoff program not government intervention? You guys think that that's voluntary? Yeah, right. My late friend Robert Frame from Vintage, Pennsylvania. Tell you what, I worked up there early in my career. He took the beef checkoff to the Supreme Court and lost. He was selling about 1,000 head of 1 to 2 day old baby calves right out of those dairies there, selling them for special fed veal there through his sale barn, selling them one at a time. It was only costing at that time about $3.50 or $4 a head to sell those. Well, he thought $1 to put on there for the checkoff was ridiculous, and it was, and it is. And he didn't charge his customers that. And they came back on him and forced him to do it. He took them all the way to the Supreme Court and lost. Robert L. Frame, Vintage Sales Stables in Vintage, Pennsylvania. The beef checkoff is not a voluntary program, guys. It's government intervention, and NCBA takes advantage of it and gets the most benefit from it. And now they're saying we don't want government intervention because we can't set a minimum negotiated cash trade. We can't say that the packers have to come in and bid on cattle rather than just set the price for them. That's ridiculous. You can make an argument for cheap grain being government intervention. You know, all these row crop grain farmers, they get some kind of a government stimulus. They get government support and help. And that's one of the things that a government does. It provides infrastructure, it keeps you safe, and it keeps your food cheap and reliable. And if it's keeping your food cheap, it's a pretty good deal unless you're the one raising the food. But, you know, that's how come we've never gotten any cheese checks on the cattle deal before. They said, well, our stimulus for the cattle industry is keeping grain cheap, and you feed the grain to the cattle. It's government intervention. Mandatory price reporting is government intervention. That's how we're trying to get this, that's the avenue we're trying to use to get this minimum negotiated cash requirement monitored and enforced. So that's a poor argument there. You don't want government intervention. Another one is they're saying it's going to be way too expensive for the industry. How's that? Because all these guys that are selling formula, they get to brag about how they plus the miserable, flimsy cash market every week because they bring their cattle on a Tuesday and they hit some of the high spots in their formulas, which they've negotiated for the kind of cattle that they feed, and they don't necessarily have to be good cattle. You can negotiate a formula for plain cattle. You can negotiate a formula for any kind of cattle that you have. But you know, that's a poor argument also, that it's going to be too expensive for the industry, and trying to tell people that, you know, if you raise really good cattle, that you're not going to be able to take advantage of the quality on those. That's ridiculous, you know. How do we take advantage of it in the feeder cattle market? When you bring your cattle on the video or through the sale ring and they've got bells and whistles and guys can see the quality, they bid them up. That's how you do that. That's a poor argument too. But let's go on and talk about what happened this past week. Look at your futures market. Last week, June live cattle, Monday was down $1.97. Tuesday up the $4.50 limit. Wednesday down $3.30. That kind of took a jolt out of things. Things were going really good until Wednesday's close. Thursday was up a quarter, and then Friday up $2.87. Be anxious to see how we start this week out. But June live cattle futures ended the week at $97 even. August ended at $97.82. May feeder cattle, Monday was down 4 1/4. Tuesday up $3.65. Wednesday down $2. Thursday down $1.50. Friday back up 92 cents. With your May feeder cattle ending the week at $124.72. August ended at $131.07. Your fat cattle, they bought quite a few cash cattle. They're doing everything they can, these packers are, to make themselves look good in the eyes of those that are looking to try to get something done here, and in the eyes of the DOJ investigators. They're paying more for fats than they really need to, just trying to save face and help their reputation out a little bit, make it look like they've got goodwill going forward. Bought a lot of cash cattle this week. Hey, we've got cattle backed up for over a month. Formula cattle too, that they should have been picking up. Why are you coming in here and buying 72,400 head in your 5-area feeding region just through Thursday? And then Friday bought several more. You know, we're pushing up there 90,000 head, something like that for the week. We'll find out on Monday when we get the reports. But doing everything they can to try to get the heat off of them. They know how short-memoried cattle people are, and they think, well, if we can get this market up there a little bit and then back off on our box beef cutout values, maybe they'll kind of forget, and they won't make that phone call to their senator, or they won't raise hell next time they go to their cattlemen's meeting. You know, I don't know. I hope the fire doesn't go out on you guys. But last week's fat cattle live sales, steers and heifers, were from $105 all the way to $117. That was $7 to $10 higher on the bottom side. And That's quite a range there, and that's quite a jump. Whenever your fundamentals didn't show for it to be any better. But I tell you what, the gall just finally got to them that they'd been pushing so much, making so much money, plus gaining over $2.50 a pound on their box beef cutout values and keeping cattle prices the same. Your dressed market, steers and heifers, was from 170 all the way up to 185. That's $5 higher on the top side. And I actually heard, we'll talk about that in a minute, but it got higher than that late in the week. But $5 to $25 higher dressed on the bottom side. And then they come in on Friday. That didn't include any of Friday's sales. Friday, Iowa sells 1,700, 113, and 182 to 190. You think they're not trying to get some of the heat off of them, paying 190 late Friday? Not buying enough to really move the weighted average too much, but still it looks good in print. Nebraska, 4,000 head from 110 to mostly 120, and dress sales from 182 to 190 on Friday. Kansas sold 2,300 head on Friday, 115 to mostly 120. Texas, 4,500 head. Look at the price range in Texas just on Friday, $1 to $1.20. Now, if that $1.20 was widely available, why would anybody sell them at $1? But you just can't get many moved that way. But, my gosh, that's a pretty good week. I know our negotiated cash trade has been pretty light here the last few years, but that would be an awful good week. What we're going to have this week would be an awful good week under normal conditions. But now the Packers are trying to take the heat off of themselves. Look at the box beef cutout values. This is the weighted average on all of last week's movement. Choice cuts, 459.04 weighted average for the week. Still up 17.51, even though your box beef cutout values were lower late in the week, the last part of the week. In fact, they were at 434.32 and down almost $17 on Friday. But select, your weighted average for all the trade last week was 439.53, up $16.15 still. But on Friday it was 419.06, down over $18. But for the weighted average, your choice select spread was $19.50, and 627 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings, moving a lot of product at still very inflated prices. And your slaughter, I talked about it getting better, inching up a little bit. 499,000 estimated for last week. That's up 47,000 from the previous week, but still down 163,000 from the same week a year ago. And now your cattle slaughter is down 6.7% year to date. And it was running ahead of last year up until we got into this COVID-19 deal. But let's look at your feeder cattle. Your real-time index on DV auction ended the week at 125.88, up 158. But actually, we didn't end up getting higher prices just straight up in your cash feeder cattle markets, in your sale barns. We saw a big jump there first part of the week, 3 to 8 higher in your Monday through Wednesday sales, and going pretty good. But I tell you what, when you close the market, your futures market on live cattle down $3.30 on Wednesday, after we thought we were going to continue to see a rally there. Then the cattle weren't hedging. They weren't really hedging before that. But Wednesday's close on your live cattle contracts took the steam out of your feeder cattle market, and your Thursday, Friday sales were about that much lower. So we ended the week kind of unevenly steady after early week gains of $3 to $8 higher, and then taking most all that back on your Thursday sales. But let's look at some of your top quotes late in the week. How about Bluegrass Stockyards in Richmond, Kentucky on Friday there? 74 head, 744 pound steers in Richmond, Kentucky, bring 139.50, guys. Torrington Livestock Markets up in Torrington, Wyoming on Friday, 122 head, 791 pound steers bring 132.75. But the highest quote that I saw anywhere late in the week was actually on Saturday at a special feeder auction in Turlock, California, at Turlock Livestock Auction Yard. 76 head, 659 pound steers bring 150, 210. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.